President Trump says the intelligence on the success of U.S. military strikes in Iran over the weekend is inconclusive, and NATO members have agreed to a massive increase in spending on defense and security. Good morning, I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. Leaders at the NATO summit in the Netherlands have agreed to spend far more money on defense spending. President Trump has pushed each country to commit to spending 5% of its GDP every year for defense and security. The massive spending increase is supposed to happen within a decade. The NATO leaders also reaffirmed their commitment to the alliance's principle of mutual self-defense. That is, an attack on one NATO country is considered an attack on all of them. President Trump says he thinks it will be decades before Iran can rebuild its nuclear program. This is after a U.S. strike over the weekend targeted 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Trump first said the strikes obliterated the sites, but NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports today he's saying the intelligence on the strikes is inconclusive.
Trump made these latest comments during a meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, kicking off the last day of the NATO summit.
Well, the intelligence was very inconclusive. The intelligence says we don't know. It could have been very severe.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was with Trump at the NATO summit, said an early intelligence report indicated moderate to severe damage at Fordo, the main nuclear site that was hit. And he says it's more likely severe, but he also says the report was preliminary and low confidence. The president said they're waiting on a report from Israel that will outline the extent of the damage from the U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear sites. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News, The Hague.
Oil prices closed at nearly $68 a barrel yesterday. That price is lower than it was before Israel attacked Iran. That may be due to the fact that a ceasefire between the countries appears to be holding. But as NPR's Camila Domonoske reports, the decrease in oil prices started well before the word of a truce.
Oil analysts and traders are increasingly confident that the Strait of Hormuz is not likely to be closed to tanker traffic. Susan Bell is with Rystad Energy.
That the markets have made the call that, I don't want to say the conflict is over, but the risk of the conflict is much lower now.
Meanwhile, the world was already awash in too much oil anyway. Supply is outstripping demand. And unlike in decades past, the U.S. is the world's #1 producer, which reduces dependence on the Middle East and means conflicts like this don't prompt as extreme a market response as they once would. Camila Domonoske, NPR News.
President Trump is claiming credit for the Israel-Iran ceasefire. He's been billing himself as a peacemaker since he re-entered office in January. As NPR's Greg Myrie reports, Trump's track record on resolving conflicts so far has been mixed.
President Trump has become directly involved in 3 separate conflicts in recent months. The Israel-Iran truce appears fragile, but seems to be holding for now after 12 days of fighting. However, the Israel-Hamas battle in Gaza grinds on. There was a truce when Trump took office, but it collapsed when Israel launched an offensive in March. On another front, Trump is in the Netherlands for a NATO summit where the Russia-Ukraine war is a top priority. Trump promised a quick end to that conflict, but the fighting has only intensified, mostly because Russia has stepped up airstrikes. More than a dozen Ukrainians were killed in the latest missile attack. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
The leader in the vote count for New York City's Democratic primary election for mayor is State Assemblyman Zoran Mamdani. He swept about 44% of the vote, but he did not earn more than 50% of the vote. New York City used a ranked choice method for voting for the first time, and an outright winner needs a majority. Still, Mamdani says he will be New York's Democratic nominee for mayor this year.
Together we have shown the power of the politics of the future. One of partnership and of sincerity.
Mamdani came in well ahead of former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. The former governor has already conceded defeat. The Republican candidate is Curtis Sliwa. Incumbent Mayor Eric Adams is running as an independent. Civil liberties groups plan to challenge a new Texas law. It requires that the 10 Commandments be displayed in all public school classrooms. Some of the same groups recently won a similar challenge in Louisiana. From Houston Public Media, Andrew Schneider reports.
Supporters say the commandments are the basis of U.S. law and should be posted in schools. But a federal appeals court ruled last week that Louisiana's similar law is unconstitutional. Rachel Lazar, who heads Americans United for Separation of Church and State, says the Texas law is too.
There are limits on the free exercise of religion. In other words, the government cannot favor one set of religious views over any others or religion over non-religion.
Americans United is a financial supporter of NPR. Lazar says her group and others are also considering suing Texas over another new law, which would let school districts set aside time for students and faculty to pray or read religious scripture. For NPR News, I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
The nation's top safety investigators say multiple failures are to blame for the mid-air door plug blowout of a Boeing jet last year. NPR's Joel Rose reports the National Transportation Safety Board met in Washington yesterday and reviewed the results of a lengthy investigation.
The chair of the NTSB, Jennifer Hammondy, started the meeting by praising the crew of Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, who got all 177 people on board safely back to Portland International Airport after the mid-air blowout. But Hammondy faulted Boeing for not having more robust safety procedures in place.
The crew shouldn't have had to be heroes, because this accident never should have happened.
Hammondy also praised Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg, who took over last year, for renewing the company's focus on safety, but she said there is still more work to do. Joel Rose, NPR News, Washington.
The makers and sellers of wedding dresses are expressing concerns about their costs in the wake of President Trump's global tariffs. They're asking the administration to protect formal wear from the new levies. NPR's Alina Selyuk reports most bridal gowns sold in the United States are made abroad.
China is by far the biggest hub for bridal gowns, and not just dresses, but also trims and crystals, veils, and hair pieces. Many brands have already started raising prices to offset tariff costs. Some stores are still absorbing them. Others have begun charging brides. Chelsea Ritchie, who's dress shopping in Los Angeles, is getting warnings of likely tariff surcharges.
Maybe an additional, I'm hearing somewhere between $200 to $1,000. It really just depends on the price. But I'm going to be honest with you, that was a pretty big blow to hear.
The Bridal Retailers Association says tariffs will not bring gown-making jobs to the U.S., given the highly limited pool of skilled craftsmen for hand-beading, embroidery, or lace work. Alina Selyuk, NPR News.
A SpaceX capsule carrying a crew of 4 is on its way to the International Space Station. It launched before dawn today at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The 4 private astronauts from the U.S., India, Poland, and Hungary will now spend about 2 weeks in orbit. Brendan Byrne has this report.
It's the 4th mission brokered by the Houston, Texas-based company Axiom Space. The company works with SpaceX for rides to the station and coordinates with NASA for the usage of the International Space Station for its astronauts. The mission comes after multiple delays, most recently after NASA investigated repairs to a leak on the space station. Now launched, it will take a little more than a day to catch up with and dock to the station. The crew will spend about 14 days living and working aboard the space station, conducting dozens of science experiments. After the time on orbit, they'll return to Earth in their capsule, splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. For NPR News, I'm Brendan Byrne in Orlando.
And I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News in Washington.